Hey, how's it going, guys? My name's Daniel, aka HashLips, and there's been a blah 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 blah. And as always, welcome to my channel. I've had a lot of requests from you guys asking me to update the Photoshop script, and that's exactly what we are going to be doing. I'm going to be doing it and coding along, so you guys can follow me coding this or simply just use the script that I'll leave in the description. As always, if you like the video, then give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and thirdly, comment below and tell me what you would like to see in the next videos. Let's get into it. So let's go ahead and find the repo that we need to work with. On the main GitHub channel of the HashLips page, you can see a lot of repositories, especially the art engine, that is a more full-fledged solution but uses Node.js to run. The one that we are looking for is this repository over here, the HashLips Art Engine PS script. You can go to this URL to directly go to this page. Then what we'll need to do is basically download it here with the releases, or you can clone it if you have Git. I'm going to click on release and then download the simple script. Click on zip and then wait for the download to complete. Extract the zip file and you'll get this folder. So now in the folder, this is how it looks, and the two main scripts are the generate.js and the update metadata. These are the only two that we'll be looking at, and today we'll be updating the generate.js. This is the file that you run in Photoshop, so the next step is to create a Photoshop file and save it in this exact location, in this folder structure. Let me go ahead and do that, and let's just base run the generate script. So just to look at how the Photoshop file should be constructed is you have your Photoshop file, and on the layer side you have groups, and it should only be groups that you have in here with the respective files in them. You can see I've got a group for the face, the fur, and the background. Make the order in such a way where it makes sense. Don't put the face or whatever attribute you have behind the fur, because that doesn't look good. You want to construct the layers as you would and as the artwork is constructed, how you designed it basically. Another important thing is that your groups that you have for the face, fur, and background, in my case, needs to be all visible. This is the only way the program will work and the script will run. The layers inside doesn't have to be visible at all. You can actually turn them all invisible. It doesn't really matter because the program in itself turns them visible one by one. But what you can do is just make sure that all of your groups are visible. And then maybe you can turn one or two on just to see what you're busy doing. But the program will run in itself, and let's go ahead and run the script. In order to do that, I will need to save my Photoshop file on the exact same folder that we've just downloaded. Here you can see is the folder with the generate.js script inside of it, and I'm just going to simply save this PSD file. I'm just going to leave it as default in that folder. Click on save and say OK. At this point, your folder structure should look like this. There's our PSD file in the same folder. We're about to run the generate.js script, and I have to point out in the previous video in this exact same playlist, I cover this in full, but I'm going to just skip through the process. What you basically do is you open the Photoshop file, click on File here at the top tabs, go to Script, Browse, and then select the generate.js script. Once you have this, you can click on Open. Photoshop will now ask you a series of questions. Do you want to use the art engine? Yes, we do. How many do you want to generate? And you can input your own values in here. Once this is done, click on OK. And depending on how big your collection is, this will take a while. Mine took very quick because I only generated 10, and the process is done. I can now go back to this folder and actually see a new build folder over there with all the images that's been generated, as well as all the metadata. This is great and all, and you can generate a collection like this for NFTs. However, it doesn't really distinguish rarity and selects different attributes based on a rarity weight that you supply. We now need to code that in Photoshop scripting style with JavaScript, so that should be very fun. Currently, these images have just been randomly selected and which attribute should be concatenated to make an image. Let's find out if there's a way where we can add rarity weights so that you guys out there and girls out there can go ahead and change the metadata or generate images based actually on some rarity and actually make some images more rare than others. In order to change the script, I'm going to open Visual Studio Code and then open this folder structure. I would like to go ahead and change the generate.js script. Here's the whole script, and as you can see, it's not really a lot. All we need to now look at is changing somewhere, something in the logic over here where we generate the actual artwork, where we can basically be more selective on which attributes we select. If you're not interested in coding along, you can just sit back and relax. I will provide the updated kind of edition on GitHub pretty soon, and then you can just download the file and simply run it. But it's important for you to understand how this works, so bear with me for a sec. Also keep in mind that when I develop, I do it in an ad hoc way. And that is because I do it on the fly. I think of solutions, what we can do and try out, not so much worried about the architecture. So keeping in mind that we're just coding on the fly for this video, now we can jump into it. So the first thing that I would like everyone to do if you want to code along is get this extension. It's the Adobe Script Runner extension. Once you have installed it, you can go to this file and then save the file. And then with Photoshop open at the back, like so, you can, in Visual Studio Code, press Shift Command P and then type in Adobe. And here you can see you have got Adobe Photoshop. When you click there, it will actually execute the script. This way it gives us a nice way to test by just Shift Command P and then enter. Although we can run the script, we do not get any console feedback. And that is sometimes a problem if you want to develop new features. Then if you want to try that, I highly recommend a new script, which is basically this one over here, VS Code to Photoshop. But because we are using the JSON library over here, I am forced to use the one that doesn't have a console output. Maybe that's something I can put on. Let me know in the comments. However, we know what we're doing, so we don't need the console. We can just go ahead and implement some logic. So running through the code, it's pretty simple. At the very top, we get this main function. And you'll see this is a pretty old style of syntax. I think it's ES3 or something. But yeah, we can't use the new latest ES6 functions. But anyway, we call the main function down here, meaning that this is the process that takes place here in the main, and it starts all the way at number 5, going down to number 47. What happens in this process is fairly straightforward. We have a few questions being asked to the user if they would like to continue, what the current supply is that they want to create, the name, and the description. After we have the user's input, we create a variable called groups and we reset the layers. This function basically sets all the groups visibility to true and all the layers inside of those groups to false. So basically, when we go to Photoshop, it will set all these eye icons to true and all these ones to false, the visibility. This is so that we have a base to start off from. So if we go back to the top, that's why it's over there. It goes in a chronological order unless we specify otherwise. But for the most part, JavaScript runs from the top to the bottom. So after resetting the layers, we get into our loop. This is a synchronous loop, so it's going to wait for the process to finish. And basically, this is the part where we generate the actual artworks, save the image and the metadata as well. Looking more closely into the loop, basically this top loop over here iterates over how many NFTs we need to create. Then we set an object, we give it some attributes which will be used for the metadata, and then we have another loop inside. This loop loops over the groups, the amount of groups there are. Then on the next line we select a random number based on the available layers, and we set that particular layer that it chose, the visibility, to true. At this point we then record which attribute was selected giving it a trait type, which is the group's name, and the value, which is the layer's name. This gets saved into the object as an attribute in here. And then we go ahead and save the image, save the metadata, and again, reset all the layers, making everything invisible again. And then it loops over and over and over. The save image and save metadata functions are quite straightforward. For the save image, we just save everything as PNG, and this line over here is to ensure that it's a small file size. For the save metadata, we just open write to a JSON file and then make sure to stringify the JSON, the object, into JSON, and then write to that file. And that is it. This to folder is basically just to make sure that a folder exists or to create one. But for the most part, that is the whole program. The problem that we have is sitting with this line over here. Actually, these two lines. The problem is that we are just selecting a random value and then selecting a random layer based on the value that we got here. We simply can't do that when it comes to rarities. We need some kind of way to determine a weight. The problem we're facing is how do we tell the program that a certain layer is more rare than another one? Well, as with the HashLips art engine, I came up with this hashtag number sequence. See the layer name over here? Over there it says bubbles hashtag 2. And for the most part, all of them have a hashtag appended with a number. This number at the end of these file names, of the layer names, represents the weight that it carries. Most people get confused at this stage, thinking that this should be a number calculated together out of 100. Not necessarily. You can make one 200 if you want to. It just means the likelihood of number 2 and 20 being selected are less. So what you need to do is keep the weights kind of similar, I would say, but then make these special ones a lot lower. For instance, the furry black, I'm going to make 2 because I really want that one to be rare. The same goes for my backgrounds. The blue gray over there is 10, then this army green is 10, but the big ultimate script is a 2. So I want the script to be rare as well as this furry black, as well as the bubble face. Another thing on the weights is that it's per group. So for the face, these are all the weights. These are not calculated globally. So the face will not interfere with the fur's weight because each group have their own respective weights associated to that group. So the fur, the face, and the background are all separate. So now that we understand where we're going to determine the weights, we have to code a way to read these weights from the names and also clear out the name before we save it in the metadata, because the name like this will look disgusting. So let's jump back into the code and let's get writing. To start off, let's go ahead and comment out the code inside this loop. Let's then give it some space and create a new variable. I will need 2 variables, and the first one would be the total weight, because we need to calculate that, and it will start off with 0. And then we'll need a new one, and this one will be the layer map, and that will be an array. So create these 2 variables, and now I think we need to loop. Keep in mind, this function can actually be taken out of this loop and made into a separate function, maybe running once, because the likelihood of the weights changing are quite slim. I'm going to keep it in the same function or the loop so that you can understand the concept a bit better. We're going to create a for loop. Now with a for loop, you need a variable, and we're going to use j because I we already used. And what are we going to look for as the length? Well, we're going to say the variable j, which is this one starting at 0, as long as it's less than something, and that something would most probably be our groups, and then we have to go and select the I. Now this basically selects the current group because we're looping over it here, and we're determining I because this is an array, and this is just pointing to an index of that array. Then we need the layers inside of that. So we're going to say that we need this dot layers, And at this point, we have another array and we get the length. So that will be the determining factor as long as j is less than the layer's length. So basically all the layers inside of each group. Then we can go j++ and we have our for loop. At this point, we'll probably need to get the weights from the name. So let's go and create a new function for that. And let's just call it get our weights. And that will just be a normal function. Now we can create a variable, and our variable is going to be the weight, and our weight's going to be equal to, well, it's going to be equal to a number, right? So we can cast a number at this point. We can take the string, because remember, we're going to basically try and get that value at the end of our layer name. So we can use the string and then maybe split from that, separated by the hashtag, because each one has a hashtag, right? And then because this is now an array, we can use pop, because pop will return to us the very last one that was popped off, thus giving us our number. Great, but what if no one specified a hashtag with a number? So what we can do in that case is we can check that if this weight is not a number that came off, right? Then obviously we know there was no weight specified, so we can reassign weight and maybe just make it equal to 1. And that is it. We can just do that, and then maybe here at the very bottom, we can return our weight. And that's the function that we can use to get the weight off of the name. And we'll use it here in the for loop. Apart from getting the weights, we also need a new function. And this function is going to be clean name. And the reason for this is because, yes, we can get the weights, but we also need a sanitized name. Now, here we can probably directly return something like our string. So let's just pass the string in there. And we're going to say the string can split by the hashtag. But this time, we're going to use shift. Now, shift, unlike pop, kind of gives us back the first item in the array, as well as pops it off. It kind of takes it away, but it returns it to us, so we can use it like this. And with this function, we should get a clean name. Now you'll see how we can use it in this for loop over here. So before we code, what is the purpose of this for loop? The purpose is to fill the layers with a layer map. A layers map will be an array of objects that defines to us maybe an index, a name, and a weight. So we can do that as well as calculate the total weight for this group. So how are we going to do this? We're going to say total weight is going to be plus equals to something. Now we already have the get rarities function up there, so we can pass that, and the get rarities requires a name. So the name where we're going to pass it is going to be the groups, this time using I because we want to select this one. And then we need to go deeper inside the group. So we need to say, well, this will be the dot layers. And then for the layers, we'll select J because we want the current layer that we're on. In Photoshop, a layer can return to us a name, and that's how we can pass it in. So the next thing we want to do is actually fill in our layer map. So that's going to be easy. We're going to say layer map dot push, and we can push an object to this array, and we're going to define maybe an index, which we might use. So let's just put it there. We can make this J for the current index. We can have a name, which will be something, as well as the weight. And the weight we can kind of make exactly the same as this. We might refine this and do it a bit better. And then for the name, we're going to simply clean this exact same name, getting it from the layer. So we're going to do that. And this will push this whole object to this layer maps array. Now this is crucial because we might need it later on to get the weight and the name, and you'll see how we use it just now. Just to recap, what's happening here is we're looping through all the layers in a group, then calculating the total weight, and then pushing a layer map so that we know exactly where each kind of attribute is mapped to with a specific weight. The next thing we can do is create a new variable and call it ran for random, And we're going to equal this to math. And what we're going to do here is something special. We're going to say this is going to be the math.floor, and then we need a random. So we're going to say this should be a random, and math.random returns to us a value between 0 and 1, meaning that if we want a value between 0 and the total weight, we simply have to multiply this by the total weight. Now we have a number called ran, but how do we use this ran to determine which attribute should be selected? Well, for this, we're going to need a self-executing function. And this is how we're going to create it. We're going to say function, and this is the syntax. So if you type this out like this, we're going to write the whole function in here. The function is written in this way. It's known as an iffy, if I can recall, but whatever the case might be, it calls itself as soon as it sees it. It doesn't need to be instantiated, but the reason we need this is because we're going to need to stop and return. The next thing we'll need is a for loop again. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but the reason why this is important to understand is that two processes take place. In the first process, we're kind of mapping everything out. In this one, we are going to determine if an attribute should be selected. So, how can we go from here? Well, it's simple. This loop is going to iterate over the same kind of array, but this time we're going to take the variable ran and minus something from it. What we're going to minus from it is actually our layer map, and this time we're going to pass in j because we want the weight for this attribute. We're going to iterate over this over and over and over until we find something that is less than 0. So if ran is less than 0, it means that we've exhausted the array and we have found the attribute we want to use. So like I said, let's go ahead and check whenever ran is less than 0, we have basically found the attribute that we want to use. Now, all we need to do then is set these to visible and actually add the object. So we can simply use this here. We can now remove that comment over there, and then all we need to do is basically update a few things. We'll need to make sure that instead of using these groups, we're going to make sure that we use the layer map and then j.name, because that's the sanitized name, and that should be it. We should now be ready to rock, but also just remember to swap out this ran for j. And then that's it. So now we should be good. Hopefully, when we run this, we should now be able to get rarity weights and rarity items included in our generations. One last thing is we should not forget to return at this point. And now we're ready to rock. You can simply take this script, which I'll upload to GitHub, and load it in Photoshop how we usually do. Or in our case, because we've got that extension, we can run Shift Command P and then select Adobe Photoshop. Here we go. We're getting asked if you want to run the art generator, and of course we do. We're going to create 10 items, and I'm going to skip the name as well as the description. And generate. See how the layers get selected visible and invisible over there? The process is now done, and we can move back to Visual Studio Code or the folder that you've saved this in. Looking at the builds, we can now see that there's images, and indeed, we get the green fur a lot, we get the green background a lot, and the blue background, and maybe the blue fur, but we don't see the black fur at all, as well as the balloon face. And that's because it's very rare. So maybe if we run this again, but this time generate a bit more images, maybe like 30, hopefully we get to see those rare attributes. So the process is complete again, and we can go back and check out our new images. And there we go. We finally managed to find a balloon face. And I promise you somewhere we might find a black fur, which would be pretty cool if we landed over there. By the way, there is a rare background as well, meaning that the script definitely works. Now that you've seen the code working and you want to take the easy route and not code everything with me, all you have to do is go and download the new release, which I've updated the code at, and it's sitting at version 1.0.1. If you click there, you can download the source file over here. Extract the file and put your Photoshop file in that folder, and then make sure that you have some rarity weights associated to it here on Photoshop. And one more thing that I want to mention on the rarity weights is that you can omit this hashtag, but keep in mind that this will automatically assign a 1, innately making it the most rarest attribute. So just keep that in mind. Then once you have downloaded that and done all those steps, watch the previous video as well, you can just load the script up here again. Just for reference, the video I'm talking about, the previous one, is this one: Generate NFT art with Photoshop the easy way. If you follow this, you'll be able to generate with Photoshop as well as change the metadata. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Like always, let me know in the comments what you think. I would really like it if you can join my channel by subscribing and giving this video a big fat thumbs up. I hope you have an amazing day. Cheers for now.